Douglas, he mentioned about jumping into the unknown and this feeling of like it's not easy. And I always have this thought that the path less taken is a path where people, it's an anxiety-induced path, you know, because you will lose control. And when you lose control, a lot of self-limiting beliefs comes up. Is this where people must focus and look into instead of like fighting against the current, so to say? Is this, what are the possible, you know, like the not so easy obstacles when someone have to let go based on your experience? For me personally, there's a couple of them, but I know it's totally different from each of us. How about?
Well, I love the metaphor of the river, okay? Because life flows. There's a lot happening to us. You know, the current of life, the social environment, the influence of social media and the times we're in, all of those things are part of the life we're in. So I say we live life and life lives us, okay? There's this relationship between who am I and how am I shaping and forming the direction and how much of it is not in my control, how much of it is about me just figuring out how to avoid the obstacles and go along with and accept. Ultimately, that's the benefit of discovering what it means to accept. I myself I'm not an advocate for the idea of passive acceptance, okay? Where I just flow and say, okay, whatever, and life is going to take me. I believe there's a kind of an active acceptance, which says, I'm part of this. There's something that's uniquely me, and it's lined up with values, it's lined up with expression, the right for each of us to have expression, be creative, to be a participant in whatever this thing is. But to realize it's not significant. We're pretty small in the bigger scheme of what all this is. But there's a difference between finding that harmony and saying I do matter, each of us matters, okay? And being too passive or too accepting and then just throwing up our hands and says, well, whatever. And then maybe being victimized by life because we're not being able to have boundaries and understand, you know, that the way we treat each other and how we go about this is, I think that's the dance. And for me, it's often when do I need to act and when do I need to let go? When do I need to say something? When do I need to hold my tongue or be quiet or just listen to what that is within myself? And I think this is the art of living, you know, is to figure out, okay, when do I apply myself and when do I restrain, or maybe we don't want too much restraint, okay? We certainly don't want repression, okay? But we want to be able to realize the world around us and that we're part of something. There's a mutuality, there's a participation. And so it is about, one of my enjoyable quotes is from William James, who says, the art of wisdom is the art of knowing what to overlook. So it means, figuring out when do I respond and when do I let it go, you know. So.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my brain is finally waking up.
Waking up, go girl.
Yeah, so what I've been, I guess, thinking about, what's been in the back of my mind since our last meeting, last episode, is that you talked about viewing life and through the lens of experiences, like being here and now in the experience, rather than setting, goals and then there goes like high expectations, idealizing something, devaluing something, like relating to this self-image, like the narcissistic part more rather than the authentic experiencing part. My question is, how do you construct those experiences that you are living here and now into something that makes meaning, constitutes meaning. Because I personally struggle a lot with experiencing if it does not in any way map on something, like something bigger, let's say. So I'm not really good at setting goals. I struggle with that a lot, probably because I'm always afraid that I won't be able to achieve it, like I disappoint myself. And experiencing is great, but also I get overwhelmed by anxiety at some point, because I feel like, okay, so I'm in here and now, but like, how does it fit into my life? What's next? So yeah, how does one find a balance? And maybe you have some thoughts here.
What a profound question to be asking, and at such an early stage in your life, okay, to be thinking about how to actually guide the process of your life when you're really learning from not too many years of adulthood, I mean, and so yes, the anxiety that might come along with that question is expecting to know the answer, and part of it is to hold that question open and discover it with the benefit of time, okay? So it's not putting pressure on yourself to think you should know. That said, I will. So one of our tendencies and one of the ways we're influenced nowadays is what I call future mindedness, okay? I set a goal, I organize my life in the direction of that goal, and I measure my success based on whether I reach it or not, and how quickly and efficiently. And while there's a benefit to that, and anyone who's accomplished a goal can feel good about having done that, there's also a lot of things that we don't consider. When we narrow the scope of our intentions, our efforts, we eliminate a whole lot of things that might be part of our experience, okay? We're channeling our energies towards something. It takes us somewhat out of the present and leads us into the prioritization of some time else, some other thing. So first of all, I never use the word goal, okay? The best I can do is intention, and the reason intention for me is slightly better is because it has more room for what's actually happening. So life is living me, and I have that intention, but I'm mostly trying to do it from the present, okay? The second thing that I think is that figuring out, well, what is it? What is it that represents what that is? And I often talk about two things. One is related to our values, okay? And so it's having a life that's in line with what matters most, okay? What it is that it represents my individual highest form, but what also then is applicable to, let's say, humanity, And we could say, well, what is it that, we can't do without, Like life would be very different if there was no love in the experience of our life, And so for me, that always fits into a category of a value that has priority. Of course, that's a big question. How do we love, But I think part of what we need to do is keep asking ourselves what's important. And the second thing is that it's the experiences we're having as we go that end up being the place where we discover the quality of our experience. So the quality of our experience is how engaged we are in the here and now experiences we're having. Okay? And that can be any time, any place. It doesn't have to be, it's beautiful meal with all the right foods, and it can be when we're fully present to where we are, including some of the painful things we might feel or the frustrations that come along with miscommunication, or somehow the quality of our experience as we're living, for me, is the place where I try to exist. So the future gets reined in. I unfold into the future. I don't go after it, you see. And of course, maybe that's easier as you get older too, because there's less future, right? I'm already over the hill, as they say, And I can understand that here you guys are figuring out how do I shape and form my life, and it's a different stage, and so but it is actually dealing with that question: how do I continue to let my life unfold from the place where I am prioritizing what matters most? And those are all big questions. What matters most? Well, what is that? What do I want? What is my desire? I'll say one more thing, and I know I'm kind of hoarding the time here, but I love this little thing I discovered called levels of desire. Okay? Because desire is an important part of who we are. And level 1 is I want what I want when I want it. Okay? We could say it's very typical of a kid, a 5-year-old, right? They're not future-minded. They're not putting anything into context. They just know, I want that and I want it now, and and it's a real valid thing. And it's a part of who we continue to be. I want what I want when I want it. But when we mature and develop, we often then start to contextualize. So level 2 desire is, I want what's good for me, what's healthy for me. I want to be able to feel good about, what I desire for myself. Okay. Now, it doesn't exclude, the piece of chocolate or the things that are, satiatingly desirable. Okay. But it puts that into a context where we don't just eat chocolate all the time every day, because we realize that's not good for me, And level 3 is when level 1 and level 2 aligns with what's good for humanity. So I want what's good for me and is in line with what's good for all of us. What's good for the betterment of the people around me. It's contributing, and it separates the individual self from the participation we have in a much bigger development of consciousness, a community of care and compassion, all these things that have to do with what we might perceive as being forwarding and helping and participating in the well-being of humanity. Now, humanity is a big word, but I actually believe it, yeah.
The third one is really tricky, because people would have very different ideas about what's good for humanity and what's good for the community. And I mean, this is where this whole tyrannical mindset is coming from. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I just have this impression that whenever a person is attempting to say what's good for, what's good for everybody, well, first, it's usually a projection of their own beliefs, and often it doesn't result into much good.
Well, and I think coming from answering that for ourselves is always contextualized with, the conflicts that come from somebody else living out what they believe that to be true. And you're absolutely right. There are those for whom power and control is their answer to that question, to determine for everyone else what they think is best. So I don't think we can try to influence how other people answer that question. I think we have to concentrate on what it is that we bring. And sometimes it's holding the space open for care and compassion and empathy and understanding. And sometimes it's recognizing a boundary that says, no, that's not acceptable. That's not fair. That's not just. Justice is a virtue, a value. And we have to stay within the parameter of what that might mean to us. So it doesn't mean that somehow we're going to be the bright light that everybody sees, okay? It's more we're going to represent ourselves in a world that is fraught with the limitations I talked about before, the ways in which collectively we are messy. We are drowning in fears and guilts and things that are historically traumatized people. We can't make the assumption that everyone will get on board when we feel like we are living our own.
But before you will sort of achieve that level 3 of having collective desires for the people, is it necessary for us to go through level 1 and level 2, and then how are we going to have this feeling of like expansion, and the boundaries, and not projecting our own personal limitations?